Nature is the door to happiness.
The things that you see, the experiences that you have while kayaking stand out.
Not only is it people's own personal kind of spiritual experiences that we try to create in the wilderness for people, it's also like this community building thing, right?
There are lots of keys you can use to unlock it.
And like we all got to be Goonies for a little bit if we grew up in the 80s. That was an absolute dream to go find, a pirate's chest full of gold.
Now, as you can tell, we're pretty passionate about catfishing. We could keep talking all night long, really.
Let us help you find your key. Welcome to the 12 Hike Podcast.
Open my eyes, and here's this Milky Way, and I'm looking at this, and like it was an instant reaction. Like I went to nudge somebody next to me because I wanted them to see the same thing I was seeing. I wanted to share that with somebody, and it was.
Ecosystems are the foundation of human civilization. If it weren't for healthy ecosystems, humanity wouldn't have been able to survive and thrive the way that it has. Healthy ecosystems purify air, they cycle nutrients so that we have access to clean drinking water, they pollinate crops so that we don't go hungry, they provide us with raw materials and resources for medicine and lots of other things. So it's up to us to take care of our very fragile ecosystems. Unfortunately, increased populations, urban sprawl, and many other factors have contributed to some severe damage to a lot of very delicate ecosystems. And you can look at ecosystems across the world. Rainforests are suffering because of this, even just basic farmlands. You had the Dust Bowl from over-farming and poor farming practices. You've also got, in my neck of the woods here in Colorado, some very delicate ecosystems high up in the mountains. Unfortunately for those ecosystems, a lot of people enjoy being in that area because it's beautiful. There's nothing better than going up in the mountains and looking at all the wildflowers blooming and looking at all the animals that are there. But they suffer from the same thing that all the other ecosystems do. Very irresponsible people. And it's hard to fight the irresponsibility. But as anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And on today's episode, I get to talk to a gentleman that started an organization to do just that. He wanted to make sure that the places he loved and the places that he grew up with were going to be accessible for future generations. He wanted to make sure that they weren't harmed to an irreparable place. He wanted to make sure that people understood if you use these resources correctly, you can enjoy the ecosystem, you can enjoy all of its splendors, but not hurt it any. So today, I'm talking with Marcus from CORE, a 4x4 conservation group that has adopted over 12 trails specifically used for outdoor recreation such as four-wheel driving, hiking, mountain biking, and horseback riding. Their efforts have made it all the way to state and federal levels, and Marcus is trying his best to make sure that these places will stay open for a long time. This is Zach Jenkins. Thank you for listening to the 12 Hike Podcast.
No worries.
So, thanks for agreeing to talk to me. I know it's kind of weird. We're just starting something kind of new. I haven't been working for a little while. We just moved here recently, and I've had to have something to put some of my energy into, and I figured this would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, gotcha. So here being in Colorado then?
Yeah, we moved from Southern Ohio in September of 2019,
Okay.
and we just moved to Loveland in January. We bought a house.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah, love it here. We've wanted to move here for a long time. We vacationed in Denver 10 or 11 years ago, and as soon as we seen it, we're like, yeah, we want to live here. We love the mountains.
Yeah. Sold, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, you know all about it. You're a what, third generation guy?
Yep, third generation native, yeah.
Do you know where your family originated from? I mean, I assume they came from out east, right?
Yeah, on my mother's side, my grandmother has French descendants that came over at some point and then worked, moving west, and some of my family was involved in hard rock mining. And on my dad's side, I have a little bit of Native American heritage as well. So kind of a mixed bag, a little bit of people being out in the West. My wife's family is even a little bit farther. She's fourth generation Colorado native, and her family has origins back in the 1859 gold rush into Colorado, and a lot of mining background.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So her family came over whenever this region was just first getting discovered. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So being a Colorado native, I'm sure you grew up doing all the Rocky Mountain things, right? Are you a hunter, fisherman, all that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because when I was growing up, we didn't necessarily identify with any one basically user group or recreation group, as we've kind of in some cases been segregated into now for like modern discussion and funding and stuff like that. But yeah, I grew up in the backcountry. In a small town that I live in and grew up in is Buena Vista in central Colorado. And so, high alpine lake fishing, hunting, camping, backpacking, hiking, summiting 14ers wasn't quite as popular back then. So it was, I've stood on the peak of several mountains, but it wasn't necessarily for a piece of a greater goal of like hiking all of them. It was just because we were doing something in the area, and that was part of the area recreation. So yeah, I mean, a background, a little bit of everything, mountain biking. I not really involved in river sports. The Arkansas River that runs through Buena Vista in Chaffee County is the most commercially rafted stretch of river anywhere in the United States. And so I've, been on the river several times with people I know. I'm not, like I said, a river enthusiast, but yeah, pretty much any type of recreation that could happen in the Colorado backcountry. At one point or another, I've done a little bit of it. And so, yeah, a little bit different, overall, perspective on outdoor recreation, and then kind of the growth of outdoor recreation at the same time.
Yeah, I know coming from Ohio, that's been a big change for me, the water sports aspect. We don't have, mountain fed rivers. We've got muddy clay bottom rivers that just turn brown in the summertime, and they don't really flow very fast. So if you kayak, it's a workout. You're paddling all day. By the time you're done, you're just spent. You just want to go home and just kind of lay down. There's none of that I've seen in my area anyway, and I've had to really adjust to it.
Yeah, it's quite, as you know, it's quite different now when you're when you're in Colorado in the watershed with changing environments, changing conditions, changing flows, sometimes changing, obstacles or paths or rapids within the river from year to year too. So it's quite a dynamic environment here for sure.
And as far as your evolution into four-wheel driving, is that something you started doing when you were really young with like dirt bikes and four-wheelers, or did that start after you got your driver's license?
Yeah, great question. So that started when I was really young. My family, my dad, my grandfather, most of my family here in Central Colorado was, in the not necessarily as a brand identification or a group or part of a club, but they all owned, some version of a Jeep vehicle. And the primary purpose for that was to access the backcountry. So we would use our road system to, access certain areas of, forest or BLM for, in a lot of times in the summer, they were, avid fishermen. So that was a deal. You'd load up all your gear in the Jeep. You would, drive what were primarily mining roads, to different places where you could get close to a lake or close enough to hike a certain distance to a high alpine lake. Sometimes we'd camp overnight. Sometimes it was day trips. Same would go for hunting, where you utilize our road systems for access points. Same thing. A lot of times camping was involved. Sometimes it was just to access areas that had really unique terrain, beautiful landscapes, and it would be to utilize the road system to access those areas. So when I was growing up, I loved going to all of these places, and I'm still an avid fisherman and love camping and being out and doing whatever. I just really enjoyed the trip in the Jeep vehicle to get to wherever we were going. I was fascinated by crawling over rocks, going on tight, twisty, old mining trails, navigating a vehicle to get through these areas. Sometimes changing conditions, the trail could change from one year to the next with, things that would happen throughout the winter and whatever. So that kind of is what sparked my interest into what we now consider the off-road industry, or the 4x4 user group. Started out, like I said, when I was young, just using those routes for access points essentially into the backcountry.
That appreciation and thrill for rock climbing and high altitude stuff, that almost has to be learned, because whenever I was looking at some of the videos and pictures of you guys doing some of your drives, I was terrified. I got sweaty just watching you crawl over rocks, and I don't know. Coming from Ohio, we don't do that kind of stuff. Our four-wheel driving consists of side-by-sides, four-wheelers, and dirt bikes. And those guys just get out and find the biggest mud holes down in our river bottoms that they can find, drive through them as fast as they can, get stuck, get pulled out by someone else, and then do it all over again. That's what four-wheel driving is for us.
Yeah, and I guess, growing up for myself, it was kind of indoctrination into that lifestyle, or baptism by fire, if you will. I didn't know anything different. I grew up as a child seeing that and seeing vehicles being in places where, to me, that was normal. And now looking back on it, it's like, wow, I can't believe my grandfather drove that Jeep into these crazy places on these narrow shelf roads, 13,000 feet of elevation. Sometimes not knowing if the road was intact at the top, and you may have to back down, a tight, twisty trail or a shelf road. So I have much more of a